This has been made a lot easier by technology. Think about WikiLeaks. Think about Anonymous. Man, think about if you're a business and you got in Anonymous's crosshairs, how do you defend yourself? It's not a place, Twitter with 140 characters is not a place for nuance. You're just screwed. If they go at you, now you're defending yourself. And the old saying is a lie gets halfway around the world before the truth gets out of bed or gets its shoes on or whatever. And if you're explaining, you're losing. Now, it's funny, these complaints don't necessarily have to be accurate. There is a group of people in this country who believe that Walmart has a deal with the Chinese government to act as food distribution centers when the Red Army invades the U.S. So people will believe anything. So, if you're Walmart, you're like, they get this from every direction. Of people saying horrible, horrible things about them, and they're in the position of defending themselves. So the accuracy doesn't necessarily matter. But think back, it's not like regulation just happened because somebody wanted power. Not that long ago, we had these little kids acted as the canaries in the coal mine. So if the little kid with the pipe blew up, you knew there was a problem. Okay, so we need a little regulation. It's not a bad thing. There's places in the world that don't have the regulatory state that we have, and see what happens. It's a little chaotic, right? There's nothing wrong with a little regulation. And at the end of the day, a global economy means that, when we have stuff like this magical device, there's stuff that goes into this that you don't just go out the backyard and mine for this. It's actually found in few places on the planet. Now, when we were the only ones after Europe was destroying itself for 50 years in this 20th century, and they couldn't really compete with us, and the third world hadn't really industrialized, it was very easy for us to just go get whatever we wanted and produce material and run the world, right? Well, now there's other players at this, right? China is on their way, trying to become the world's leader in global manufacturing. And so they want this stuff too. And then every country in Europe that has sophisticated manufacturing wants to get these minerals that are found in really nasty places. And how'd you like to be one of these poor suckers that trudges into this hole every day with a guy with an AK-47 pointed at you so you can go dig up some little mineral so I can have an iPhone? I mean, don't they deserve a little protection? So it's not like this is just being done for no reason. The world's a dangerous place, and we love this stuff. And the reality is this expensive stuff is disposable. I mean, my kid won't even take my used iPhone, right? She's got to have her own new one. So everybody wants a new one every couple of years. Well, this stuff's got to get disposed of. For 10,000 years of recorded human history, our trash was banana peels and apple cores. That's what we did. That's what we threw away as a species. And it degraded into the ground and everything was fine. This thing's going to last for 20,000 years. You can't just throw it in a hole and wait for it to go away. Plus, it's got stuff in there, if it leaches into the ground, eventually in the future of our species, somebody's going to get poisoned by it. So there's a reason for all this stuff. Our trash is really getting nasty, man. So we need to have some method of disposing of this stuff. We need to have some regulation as to how do we get this stuff out of the ground in a way that is not really, really abusive of people with no power. And then how do we produce it in a way that doesn't destroy the environment? And then how do we get rid of it in a way that doesn't ruin the planet for the future? I mean, you know me, I'm the least, environmental greenie in the world, but this is pretty logical. You got to have a solution for it. Now, we'll argue about the solutions.
Obviously, us in Europe, it seems where the focus is. The Chinese and the Indians, that's where you got over half the people, majority of the pollution. And they're saying, we're not going to do this until we catch up with you.
Right.
Well, by the time that happens, you recorded smog in Los Angeles coming out of China. I saw something over there about a 10-story pile of trash outside of Dubai you can see from the space station. It's burning or something, it's smoke itself off. I don't know, it's something like, so You just wonder if we, you know, this is if we did all this stuff, does it really? And I'm all about green and taking care of the earth, and I can't stand somebody throwing a piece of trash.
Right. Exactly.
You just wonder all this effort, all this stuff done, is it going to move the needle? Right. We do it, Europeans do it. You know, Africa can't afford to do it. They're just trying to survive. I feel sorry for those people.
Yeah.
They're close the mind to it. Then what they do.
Right. Right. Yeah, and you know where it happens? It happens, the responsible stewardship of natural resources and the environment happens where free market capitalism and individual sovereignty rule the day, right? I mean, so the hope for mankind is free market capitalism, but that's a separate breakout session. But to your point, yeah, does it move the needle? No. But this isn't about whether this is the right approach or wrong approach. This is about reality. And you don't have to like it, but you can't deny it. Because I don't like it, but I realize why they're doing it. I don't like that either. And the reality is the landscape is changing. And we're going to have to be able to respond if we want to be able to sell stuff to big customers that do business globally. And that's the way to think about it. We used to what? We used to just chuck those fluorescent tubes into the dumpster, right? Well, now we have to recycle them after a certain volume. And I don't know if you make money on recycling or not, but I'll bet at one point you did. So maybe it'll help us sell something. Maybe if we think about this as an opportunity to generate a competitive advantage where we're not just selling on price, where we actually are providing value to the customer when they call you and say, I have to do this conflict minerals thing, I have to do this human trafficking declaration, and you actually can help them rather than say, you know, maybe there's a competitive edge there. And that's the way I'm trying to get us to think about this stuff, because it isn't going away. And these non-governmental organizations, I think, are the ones who are going to have an outsized influence in the very near future, because they have this moral authority and this halo effect where they're the good guys. Meanwhile, governments around the world are either gridlocked or captured by interest groups. So even in a nation like ours, which I would argue has the greatest system of governance ever devised by man, we can't get anything done because the legislature's gridlocked. So everything's happening in the courts and in the regulatory state. Well, that's why these NGOs are making so much hay, because they can go out and they've got these global brands. Apple doesn't manufacture anything. That's all contracted out to some firm in China. They do the design, right? Their whole value is in that design and in that brand. They all monetize their brand on their financial reports, right? The brand, in some cases, is the most valuable thing they have. Apple doesn't want you thinking of that poor sucker in the hole with the AK pointed at him. They want you thinking of the young, thin, white people dancing around with their phones. And that's all so pretty, right? And we're hip and we all got money. Well, guess where that came from? Don't think about that. Look at the dancing people. This is all very fun, right? So they got a lot to lose. And they, again, minimize risk. The cost of that lost brand equity, if they're all of a sudden the target of a shaming campaign and they're a bad, irresponsible corporate citizen, the cost of that to their brand equity would dwarf what they spend on compliance. So it's not going to change. And we talked a little about this concept of corporate social responsibility. There's a concept here that there is a triple bottom line. We all know about our financial bottom line, but there is also the impact you have on your people and the communities in which you operate, your customers and your employees, and on the planet. What is the impact of of the processes that you have on the environment? This is coming fast in our industry, frankly, because we got a pretty good story to tell. We're efficiency, right? We help people spend less money on electricity. We help people use less energy. And guess what? I'd have thought maybe 20 years ago that Ben and Jerry would eventually die off, and we'd kind of go back to saying, let's just make money. Because I'm a child of the 80s, and that's my framework, is it's very pragmatic, right? Well, guess what? These millennials in the room are mission-based, and they want mission in their work. And there's just, I think we're kind of same generation, there's just not enough of us demographically. So we can still rise to positions of prominence and power, but we're just going to be overrun by the millennials because there's just like 10 times more of them than us. So it doesn't matter what we think. We can be as pragmatic as we want, but the kids that we're going to be dealing with and doing business with have different expectations that are much more along the lines of Ben and Jerry's than Ronald Reagan. Our industry's so good at this triple bottom line stuff. So if you want to get into it, and I expect you to be able to read this, but this is Schneider Electric, and they literally do a triple bottom line. They do a financial metrics, in their financial statement, they do a sustainability metrics where they look at their impact on the planet, profit, and people. They set targets, and then they report their report their results versus their targets. Siemens, another one. You know, the kids are running and it's all green and it's all fun and they're responsible and they're saving the planet and they're on a Dow Jones Sustainability Index. They're a global leader in this concept of triple bottom line. General Electric, obviously, you know, we've got our people, we've got our profit, and we've got our planet. Gray bar, if you're looking at the distributor world, again, another company you can look at in terms of a model for how you can do this and use it as a marketing and selling tool more than anything. They're a hero of the planet. They're one of the top 150 national places to work. They're employee-owned. They're the greenest of the green, and they're a Fortune 500 company. They've got all of it going on, right? People, profit, planet. Sonepar, same way. They literally just have it here. There's their people, profit, and planet. European companies are very good at this because there's a lot more built into their regulatory structure for them to be more responsible for the way products, end-of-life products are managed between you hear the RoHS, restrictions on hazardous substances, and the waste electronics, RoHS and WEEE from a few years ago. So they're pretty good at this. Good places to look for examples of how it's done. Wesco does it too, but Wesco does it differently. They don't talk so much about the triple bottom line. They talk about the way their products that they sell perform to save their customers money, and using an energy play there. So there's also more of a strictly financial run that you can take at that. So again, there's multiple phases of compliance. You got the regulations that you have to do, right? The government, or they'll fine you and put you in jail. Then you've got where the customer comes to you and says, I have to do this, which means you have to do it for me. Or you have to do it, you know, for me, or you don't get the business or whatever. So there's different ways. And I think what I'm trying to get you to think is, while we are concerned about what's coming from the government, I think if I were you, I'd be more concerned about what's coming from your customers. And maybe you trade in an area that's local enough that that's not an issue. I don't know. But if you've filled out a conflict minerals declaration, this is the beginning.